Hello, one and all. I am back yet again with another week, and it is time to yet again talk about Kamen Rider Saber with episode 18, The Flames Obsession, defeating the Megid, or Megiddo. I feel this title is a bit of a weird misnomer concerning the fact that, as the villains of the week, they have to be defeated. But, it makes it seem like Toma is completely obsessed with killing Megiddo or something, but it really isn't. If honestly, it feels more like the rest of Source Logos are more obsessed with killing Megiddo than he is, concerning the events of this episode. But, speaking of, we're following up from last week, where Yuri basically called out Toma for being a pretty shit swordsman and not, striking down the Megiddo, which he was supposed to do. But, Toma still wants to save May's editor, or May's boss, who's also his editor, in order to, because he wants to save people's lives, because, he's a good person and a hero and all that kind of stuff. He has to want to save people's lives. But, obviously Yuri's like, you have to cut her down to save her, all that kind of stuff. And at least do a bit of a funny, weird joke at the end, because the way Toma's interpreting it is he has to kill her to save her. But that's not really the case, as we'll find out by the end of the episode, as well as Toma finding out another way around it. Anyway, the Source Logos are yet again sitting around, and what we now can be confirmed is the southern base, because obviously it doesn't have northern base's big table in the middle of it, and it's a bit darker, and Toma in this episode does go back to northern base in his closet, and no one's there. So they're sitting around southern base and, obviously getting the orders yet again to go after Toma and the Sword of Light. They basically learned Sword of Light is working with Toma, basically, and Rentaro and Tetsuo decide to go out and basically ask Toma what the frick. Rentaro still doesn't want to believe Toma's a traitor and believes that Toma's just being misled. And, Tetsuo basically wants to figure out about the Sword of Light and all that kind of stuff, because they're both a little they both, basically, the only one fully on board with the whole Toma's a traitor trade is Ren, because, again, he was never the closest to Toma. He was more on Team Kento. And while the other ones had at least a moment with Toma where they got to bond with him in a way, Ren never got that, if you look back, which is kind of hilarious looking back on it to see that Ren was never got a bonding moment with Toma. The closest they got to it was their little bet in that one episode, and even then, that was more, a thing for Kento. Basically, they ambush Toma on that one rooftop where the stage set is, and try to have a talk with them. Toma does a poor job at wording shit again, and no one comes out of it, basically, with their minds changed. It's one of those whole weird double speak things where they have to talk in a way without explaining what the fuck. Everyone comes away with the misunderstanding. It's a really weird thing that happens a lot in fiction, and it happens in this scene. Anyway, the Yeti Megiddo attacks yet again. Rentaro obviously chills, goes down to fight it because Megiddo, he fights Megiddo. But Toma chases after him, basically trying to convince him that it's a human, which, Rentaro, he's never, this is the first time, apparently, that Megiddo are becoming humans are being made from humans to Rentaro's perspective, so obviously he says it's impossible for a human to be a Megiddo. So, he obviously doesn't go with it, and, Toma is handicapped fighting both of them at the same time, while Rentaro is trying to basically still see Toma as his friend while also dealing with the Megiddo. So, basically, Rentaro is currently speaking the most complex character in the show. And I really want him to get over it, because I don't like the emotionally distraught Rentaro. He looks very emotionally destroyed in this episode. So, his actor's doing a really good job. He does bring back that weird referring to people as Homo sapiens thing that he did in, episode, way back when, which I thought would lead something, but never did. It's just a weird speech pattern, I guess. I mean, he says that he's a fellow Homo sapiens. Again, it feels like this was meant to be something else, but just ended up being a weird speech pattern thing that he just happens to call humans Homo sapiens. It does not like he calls every animal by their species name, so I don't know what the fuck's up with that. Anyway, it gets away. Also, we have a quick fight between Slash and Psycho, because Yuri's there at the scene too. He's kind of observing Toma right now, basically his own version of testing him. They have a quick fight, which leads to a bit of a funny thing because he's using Shadow, and everyone makes a mistake of hit the Shadow when that's not the Raider. That's just the Shadow. It's kind of funny to see, which makes me honestly believe, will we ever see Yuri lose a fight? Because again, it's hard to fight a sword by itself, as because you have to hit the sword and all that kind of stuff, and it's a very small target, and it's a very fast moving sword. So I wonder if we'll ever see Yuri lose a fight on his own. But right now he's now being debuted, so he can't lose at anything ever, especially because he's the most powerful thing in the show right now. Anyway, after all this, Yuri explains that he sealed Arthur's power in Avalon, and he was in Avalon all this time, and he merged with the Sword of Light to keep his power out of the hands of evil people. And also explains that the Swords of Light and Darkness are also the keys to the Great Power. And I'm really starting to get annoyed by the fact that they call this thing the Great Power. It feels really generic, and I really hate it. It's like, oh, the Great Power, the Great Power. I'm really getting sick of people talking about the Great Power and wish it was something more specific. Like, at least a more defined term than something generic as the Great Power. Anyway, obviously, Toma's trying to think of a way to beat the Megiddo without killing, the editor inside of the Megiddo, save her. And, the big Megiddo in charge are super, super pleased with their plan that's going, and then Legios goes out. So, eventually, Toma's, because Yuri basically keeps playing around with the kids' toys in the background of shots, because he's, modern caveman. That old joke. He gets an idea from watching Yuri play with the toys. He sees like some bread come out of some toy bread come out of a toy toaster, and that gives him an idea. So he decides to enact his plan, and they corner. I don't know how they know she's in a warehouse, but they find her in a warehouse, which is the standard Toei warehouse scene, because it's the same warehouse every time, so obviously it all looks the same. They find her in a random ass warehouse, which it would make a bit more sense if this was the camping site, at least. Because, that's where she was at first, but I guess that wouldn't make any sense. And it basically would make a bit more sense if it was the camping site, or they had some other way to track her down or something. But no, they find her in a random warehouse, and she's begging for help, and an honestly really, really good scene, where she's like begging for help and freezing over before the Yeti Megiddo basically pops out of her. And it's a pretty horrific scene, and I kind of love it, and I wish we got more of that. The kind of weird body horror-esque stuff that could imply. But anyway, they fight. Legios shows up, and he's fighting. But he's fighting Psycho, who he keeps throwing boulders at the Shadow, and obviously it doesn't work because it's a Shadow. And Toma comes up with a clever plan to basically let the Yeti rampage to completion, let the book be finished. The book pops out of the Yeti for some reason, and then Toma destroys the book then, which saves Miss Editor. I don't know how the specifics of this work exactly, but it does, and so it's a happy ending. From their standard, writers teaming up, or in this case, Toma using Draconic Knight and using Psycho, using Sword of Light, and beating the Yeti Megiddo and basically backing off Legio, who runs off. And then at the end of it, Psycho reveals, oh yeah, you just could, when I was saying you should cut her down, I meant you should use me to cut her down, because we could have got the same result if you used me, which led to a pretty funny Toma meme face. I kind of wish it was more specific so we could have avoided a lot of this, but we got what we got. Toma just needs to learn to interpret wording a bit better, and Yuri needs to learn how to say things a bit better. So basically it was a pretty basic episode this week. There are a few background details I really liked. Again, I like Rentaro. His actor's acting the fuck out of his scenes. Rentaro's a little moral conundrum here because he's Toma's friend. And he wants to be there for Toma. He wants to believe in his friend, but he also is a child raised by the Swords of Logos and wholly believes in our mission and believes in the guild. He's having a hard time differentiating between the two worlds, or at least the two ideals. He can't believe that there's a traitor in the Swords of Logos because that goes against his entire worldview. So he's struggling with that right now. I like Yuri. I still like Yuri. He's a fun character. He's basically playing the weird mystic mentor bit, which is kind of fun to see in terms of Saber. Especially now that he's an actual character, not just a dude sitting on the sidelines watching. I think maybe because next week they hype up a fight between Saber and Slash, so maybe Tetsuo will get over himself or realize that Toma is not an evil prick, and maybe this will help resolve the whole Swords of Logos thing, because they say that before they deal with the whole great power situation or the world imbalance situation or whatever the hell's going on right now, they have to get those Swords of Logos sorted out, which basically means, hey, let's work on finding that traitor and ending that whole subplot right here, ending that whole subplot pretty quick, which I'm kind of in favor of, because I would hate for this to be drawn out through the entire series, but, it is a good way just to get it over with. At least get the road started to getting it over with. So, we can get back to our standard cast, even though this will mean May goes back to basically doing nothing again. And maybe we'll find out where Sophia is, because, again, she's still missing. Overall, pretty decent episode. Something I didn't notice, too, is that, Toma still has Ikuzuchi, the Sword of Thunder. I can only remember that one specifically because of the name Ikuzuchi, because of Blaze Blue. Anyway, he still has Kento's sword, and they're not really in a hurry to give it to anybody else. But it is interesting to know that Toma still does have Kento's sword. Still no word on what the Sword of Darkness is, because apparently that will be necessary to use as a key for this great power thing, which I'm betting the entire series will lead up to towards its endgame. Another interesting note, someone did point this out, that Toma has used a lot of different swords throughout the course of the series. And it makes me wonder if he'll get a final form that will basically do like a Kiwami arms, or not Kiwami arms. Wait, that is Kiwami arms. And just use all the weapons, which would be kind of cool if, three of the weapons were exactly the same sword, just with different emblems. But, that's just its own thing. That's just toy design, basically. So that is episode 18. Again, pretty standard episode. I'm looking more forward to next week, because we might progress a little bit more with the whole Swords of Logos plot, because they've basically been in the background the past two episodes. Next week they might start being a bit more serious about hunting down Toma and trying to get the Sword of Light and all that kind of stuff, and Toma can get more serious about stopping them. But yeah, that's it for this week. See you all next week, and hope we get a more meatier episode, because I honestly do want a more meaty episode. We're in the mid-series doldrums right now. This is basically, this was right around when that freaking job contest started in 01. So we are in the mid-season doldrums of episodes. So I'll see you all next time. Hopefully we'll get out of this mid-season doldrum.